The Acolyte Episode 4 Day has just dropped. My dear friends, it ended with a massive cliffhanger. And you already know what next week's episode is going to be called. Night. What's going to take place in the dead of night on Kofar? Are we going to see some more Jedi losses? Because the helmeted Sith, who let's be real is Chimera, confronts the Jedi. But now that May has seemingly left the Sith, I think we're about to see a massive shift in the story of the series, and Chimera, the helmeted guy, is probably working for a bigger bad in the shadows. I know I've brought this up before, but it's very much worth considering. Leslye Headland said that while she's adhering to the Bane rule of 2, we know with the Sith there is a master, we know that there is an apprentice, but in DPU there is a concept of an acolyte, which is underneath apprentice. The Jedi don't seem to suspect they're Sith. The way the Sith arrived into the frame, levitating, almost like a Dementor, something we've seen Count Dooku do. Now this episode was certainly a big improvement over last week. But there are certainly issues I want to address, and what fans are debating the most, does this episode undermine some of the Phantom Menace? I was so excited to see Cal Narka in the present day, and we did get a little bit of him, and then sometime in the middle of last week someone told me, oh by the way, don't you know that when the Jedi get there, Cal Narka is practically dead? And I was thinking, I'm hoping that is wrong. I want to see Cal Narka lightsaber action in the present day. I know we're in for a flashback where he's fighting Torbin on the witch world of Brendok. I know there is more Cal Narka in the past that we're going to see in the next episode, and I think episode 6. But in the present day, Cal Narka was ripped in the chest by the mysterious helmeted figure, Smiler Ren, as we like to call him. And generally as a fan of the Wookiees, I wanted to see him join the rest of the Jedi and confront whoever this is. As I say, very likely to be Chimera. He was clearly hiding something from May, not telling her he was the one behind her test. And the fact, how could her so-called master have gotten there so quickly? He is her master, but in the grand scheme of things, I think he's the acolyte to a bigger Sith. So, a lot of questions going into next week. How is the second half of the season going to pan out? How is the story going to change now that it seems like May's loyalty lies with her sister Osha, knowing that she's alive, and not staying loyal to the dark side? As I say, there have been theories Osha is going to be the acolyte, she's got revenge in her, she's got a lot of things the Jedi would deem unfavourable in terms of her emotions and her fear, which is why she left the Order. So, I still think we're in for a twist. I also still stand by my theory that I don't totally trust Sol, and aside from his sins of the past, which he promises to admit to Osha once they're back on the ship with May, there's something more to him. Now let's talk about the main things fan discourse is going to be centered around before episode 5. Ki-Adi-Mundi. He's alive. He's in their show. We speculated, are we going to see Yarael Poof, Operan Sissis, Yaddle? And I guess the reason I really didn't think about Ki-Adi-Mundi is because in Star Wars Legends, he's not born for another 7 years. But in Disney canon, this was never truly established, and now we know, he's a full adult. So why did they put him in the show? To me it seems obvious. Leslye Headland knows in The Phantom Menace, he is the one on the Jedi Council who says the Sith have been extinct for millennia. He denied Qui-Gon Jinn's experience encountering Maul and said it can't be a Sith. Now here's the problem. Ki-Adi-Mundi is aware of the May debacle. He's standing there with the other Jedi Masters like Venestra Rho, Master Sol, this thing, and he's hearing about the situation. The 3 Jedi Masters who've been killed and the 4th, Sol, who Venestra says is also a target. But it seems like they don't suspect Sith. They seem to be dallying around the fact it could be someone who was trained by a Jedi, another Force group, but they don't seem to be like, oh yeah, maybe the Sith have returned, maybe this threat from a long time ago is back, so they don't come to that conclusion. But Ki-Adi-Mundi says, maybe we should tell the High Council, and Venestra doesn't want this getting out because she knows the Senate is going to hear word of it. They seem to imply there are some other splinter groups of dark side Force users who have troubled the Jedi in the past, which could be why they don't necessarily assume it's a Sith. And this is where I think people have a problem, because given how proficient in the Force this helmeted acolyte is, and given how powerful his master would be, after the Jedi team who went to Kofar discovered him, when they go back and tell Mundi and Venestra about the red lightsaber, aren't they going to figure it out? Or do all of these Jedi have to die? Because at some point, you have to figure one of the options when you see a red lightsaber is Sith. I get that at this point they've not been on the Jedi radar for some time, but still, that's still something in the zeitgeist of Jedi knowledge and history. And this is where I think we have to consider the fact Mundi is lying. His morals are questionable at best. He wasn't the best father, he wasn't the best husband, he's done some awful psychopathic things, so I guess it wouldn't be too much of a stretch in The Phantom Menace that he's lying about the whole thing, and he had heard of a potential Sith some years before, even if it wasn't confirmed. It's just a bit of a weird one for me they would choose to put Mundi in this, to be aware of the situation, because you'd figure if Qui-Gon Jinn comes up to the Council in The Phantom Menace, he would have at least said, about a century ago we heard of a similar situation, maybe we should look into it and deal with it in a serious way, have a plan, a proper plan. But we've also got to keep in mind, Leslye Headland wants to portray the Jedi as the bad guys, and so sweeping issues under the rug to uphold their reputation is par for the course, especially during the Age of Light, the golden era of the Republic. And this is kind of the discourse that has emerged from this. Oh, and also just to let you know, this is not Plo Koon, it's a random Caldor. So when I saw Mundi in the next scene in the halls of the temple, I was wondering did they include some other favourite prequel Jedi? And there I was, slowing it down frame by frame, looking for maybe Jedi Master Yaddle in the background, sipping her morning latte and downing a couple of Krispy Kremes. But no, we did get one of these again, a Jedi Talafar. If you guys remember in the Bad Batch Season 3, one of the babies, one of the specimens at the Vault on Tantis, was a member of this species. And then we come on to Basil. I'm going to be talking about him in more depth in an upcoming video later in the week, but basically, he's from a species introduced in 1979, the second in the Han Solo Adventures trilogy. Tynans were a beaver-like species which they've just adapted for live action. It merits its own video, and we do have a lot to get through in this video, so I'm just going to move swiftly on. All I'll say is, he was cute. I think one of the strengths of the show is the alien designs, but it kind of bothered me he didn't speak Galactic Basic, and again, I will get into this in a separate video, because this species was so much more than just a sniffer dog, or should I say a sniffer beaver. Goodness, that sounded wrong. Another thing I suspected was going to happen after the first 2 episodes was a flirtatious, romantic interest between Osha and Jeki, but they don't seem to have known each other very long to already be this close. They did start to develop it in an interesting way on Kofar, the differences in philosophy of a current Jedi, Jeki, and a former Jedi, Osha. A lot of the dialogue in this episode again was very clunky. I thought the editing could have been a bit better as well. And sometimes it just takes you out of it, because on paper, as I say, the story isn't that bad, but sometimes it feels as though with the budget, with the amount of so-called talent that went towards this show, they could have done better with certain scenes, with certain chemistry between characters. I'll give you an example, the delivery of the comedic lines when it's supposed to be funny just falls flat, whether it's the scene where it transitions from Osha being like, I'm not going to wear the civilian suit, to her wearing it, or when Yord tells the joke about the tracker needing a tracker. You get the impression the creatives wanted you to laugh at this, but it just falls flat in its delivery. I'll give you 2 massive positives though, the acting of Lee Jung-jae and Manny Jacinto. I know fans are saying Sol is nothing like Qui-Gon Jinn, and I think that point of comparison can almost take away from your enjoyment of Master Sol, but those 2 actors are definitely the peak of this series, and of course, whenever we've had Carrie-Anne Moss. But to me, Chimera has the perfect cadence to be a Sith Acolyte, awkward, reserved, deliberately deceiving in his shyness in social situations. I also found it quite interesting that all over Kalnaka's walls he has dyad imagery, almost like a force yin and yang, which demonstrates he's been struggling with what took place on Brendok just as much as Torbin, but in his own way, as an isolationist. I wonder what was going through his head. Did he work something out? As I say, there is something Sol is concealing from Osha about the truth of her relationship with her sister, the connection they have, and the reality of what took place on Brendok. Another major criticism I see is the fact May has turned away from the ways of the Sith prematurely, very quickly. I think Osha, seeing that she's alive, was the catalyst for all of it. But considering she followed through with the deaths of 2 Jedi Masters, it does seem a bit strange to suddenly want to give it up. That's another thing they could have fleshed out. It does, however, make for an interesting second half of the season because we don't know the direction it's going to go in. Now, given the fact we're kind of seeing May step away and Chimera step into the role of the Acolyte, it makes me think there is still hope this series is a backdoor story for something concerning Tenebrous, or maybe even young Plagueis. I'm still very, very, very skeptical of the vat at the heart of the witch temple on Brendock. Was that being used as a laboratory? Is that a hint? And also, 16 years ago, after the Jedi and Osha left, who discovered May and took her off-world? But those are some of my initial thoughts. That, I guess, is my review. I'm hoping they're able to tie some of that up in the next few episodes without having too much of an implication on the Phantom Menace. That being said, this episode was certainly an improvement. I want to know what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe if you're new, and may the Force be with you, always.